Jake Williams, 22, vanished on March 15, 2003, during what should have been a routine Friday night delivery in small-town Pennsylvania. For 7 years, his case remained an unsolved mystery. Then they found the quarry. What emerged from those dark waters didn't just solve Jake's disappearance. It revealed a truth so shocking that it changed everything police thought they knew about missing persons cases. The most chilling part? The answers were hiding in plain sight all along. Tonight we uncover what really happened to Jake Williams and why the truth took 7 years to surface. Jake Williams had been working at Tony's Pizza for exactly 8 months and 12 days. He was the kind of employee every manager dreams of having: punctual, reliable, and genuinely friendly with customers. The regulars knew him by name, and he knew their usual orders by heart. Mrs. Henderson on Maple Street always ordered a small margarita with extra basil every Friday at 7:30 p.m. The college students at the Riverside Apartments preferred large pepperonis with extra cheese, usually called in around 9 p.m. after their study sessions. But Jake wasn't planning to deliver pizzas forever. He had bigger dreams. Every dollar he earned went into his college fund, carefully counted and deposited into his savings account at the end of each shift. He was just $2,847 away from having enough for his first year at Penn State, where he planned to study mechanical engineering. His girlfriend Sarah often joked that he counted his tips more carefully than a bank teller. On that particular Friday night, Jake was in especially good spirits. He'd just received his acceptance letter to Penn State earlier that week, and the reality of his dreams coming true was starting to sink in. His manager, Tony Rossini, remembered Jake being more talkative than usual, discussing his plans for college and his excitement about finally leaving the small town behind. Jake was always professional, Tony would later tell investigators, but that night he seemed, I don't know, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. The evening progressed normally. Jake completed 6 deliveries between 5 p.m. and 9:30 p.m., each one taking him to familiar addresses around Millbrook. He knew the shortcuts through the residential neighborhoods, the houses where the porch lights were broken, and the customers who tipped well versus those who counted out exact change. At 9:47 p.m., the phone rang at Tony's Pizza. Tony answered, as he always did, with his cheerful Tony's Pizza, where every slice is a little piece of heaven. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, not one of their regular customers. The caller, who identified himself as Mike, requested 2 large pepperoni pizzas to be delivered to 1247 Quarry Road. Tony paused. Quarry Road was on the outskirts of town, about 15 minutes from the pizza shop. It wasn't unusual to deliver that far out, but something about the address nagged at him. He'd lived in Millbrook his entire life, and he couldn't quite place the exact location. "Is that the old Morrison property?" Tony asked, trying to place the address. "Yeah, that's right," the caller replied quickly. "The house with the blue shutters." Tony didn't remember any blue shutters on Quarry Road, but customers often gave imprecise descriptions of their homes. He took down the order: 2 large pepperoni pizzas, extra cheese on both, thin crust. The total came to $23.50. The caller said he'd pay cash and hung up before Tony could ask for a phone number. Another red flag that Tony would later regret not pursuing. Jake was cleaning the prep counter when Tony handed him the order slip. "Last delivery of the night," Tony said. "Then we can close up early." Jake glanced at the address and frowned slightly. Like Tony, he was familiar with most of the roads in Millbrook, but Quarry Road was in a part of town he didn't visit often. It was mostly rural, with large properties separated by stretches of woods and farmland. "You sure about this address?" Jake asked, holding up the slip. "The guy seemed sure," Tony replied. "Said it was the Morrison place with blue shutters." Jake shrugged and grabbed his keys. He loaded the 2 pizzas into the insulated delivery bag, checked that he had enough change in his cash pouch, and headed for the door. His beat-up 1998 Honda Civic was parked in its usual spot behind the restaurant, the odometer showing 186,432 miles of faithful service. "Don't stay out too late," Tony called after him. "Sarah's been calling, asking when you'll be done." Jake grinned and waved. "Tell her I'll call her when I get back. This shouldn't take long." At exactly 9:54 p.m., Jake Williams climbed into his Honda Civic, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot behind Tony's Pizza. The security camera above the back door captured his car turning onto Main Street, heading toward the outskirts of town. It was the last time anyone would see Jake Williams alive. When Jake didn't return to Tony's Pizza by 10:30 p.m., Tony began to worry. Jake was nothing if not reliable. He'd never been late returning from a delivery, not once in his 8 months of employment. By 11 p.m., Tony's concern had escalated to genuine alarm. Tony tried calling Jake's cell phone, but in 2003, cell coverage in rural areas was spotty at best. The calls went straight to voicemail. Tony then called Sarah, Jake's girlfriend, hoping Jake had stopped by her apartment after his delivery. "He's not here," Sarah said, her voice immediately tense. "He was supposed to call me when he finished work." "Tony, this isn't like him." Tony agreed. He decided to drive out to Quarry Road himself to check on Jake. The route took him through the center of Millbrook, past the darkened storefronts and the single traffic light that blinked yellow after 10 p.m. As he drove toward the outskirts of town, the streetlights became sparse, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides. Quarry Road was a narrow, winding stretch of asphalt that cut through dense woods and past a few scattered farmhouses. Tony drove slowly, scanning both sides of the road for any sign of Jake's Honda Civic. The address on the order slip, 1247 Quarry Road, should have been about 3 miles from the main road, but as Tony continued driving, he realized something was wrong. The house numbers along Quarry Road were all wrong. He passed 1156, then 1203, then 1289. There was no 1247. More troubling, there was no Morrison property with blue shutters anywhere along the road. Tony had grown up in Millbrook, and he knew every family on every street. There was no Mike Morrison, and there never had been. By midnight, Tony had driven the entire length of Quarry Road twice. There was no sign of Jake, no sign of his car, and no house matching the address on the delivery slip. Tony's hands were shaking as he drove back to town and headed straight to the Millbrook Police Department. The night desk sergeant, Bob Murphy, had known Jake since he was a kid. Jake's father had been Bob's partner on the force for 12 years before retiring, and Jake was practically family. When Tony burst through the doors of the police station at 12:23 a.m., explaining that Jake had vanished on a delivery to a non-existent address, Bob immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "We need to get a search party organized," Bob said, reaching for his radio. "This kid doesn't just disappear." By 1 a.m., word had spread through Millbrook's small community. Jake's parents, David and Linda Williams, arrived at the police station still in their pajamas, their faces pale with fear. Sarah was close behind them, clutching her cell phone and trying Jake's number every few minutes. "There has to be an explanation," Linda Williams kept saying. "Maybe he had car trouble. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he's helping someone." But even as she spoke, her voice carried a tremor of doubt. Everyone who knew Jake understood that he would have found a way to contact them. He wouldn't have simply vanished without a word. The initial search began at dawn on March 16th. Volunteers from the community joined police officers in combing through the woods along Quarry Road. They searched abandoned buildings, old mining shafts, and any place a car might have gone off the road. The state police were called in to assist, bringing search dogs and helicopters. For 3 days, the search continued. The dogs picked up Jake's scent at various points along Quarry Road, but the trail always seemed to fade near the old limestone quarry that gave the road its name. The quarry had been abandoned for over 30 years, its water-filled pits surrounded by rusted fencing and warning signs. But here's where the story takes its first truly disturbing turn. The police did find something during those initial searches, something that should have been a major clue, but was initially dismissed as unrelated. On the morning of March 18, 3 days after Jake's disappearance, a search volunteer discovered a cell phone lying in tall grass about half a mile from the quarry entrance. The phone was a Nokia 3310, Jake's phone, according to Sarah. But the phone appeared to have been deliberately placed there, not dropped. It was lying face up in an area where the grass had been pressed down, as if someone had carefully positioned it to be found. More disturbing was what investigators found when they examined the phone. The last call Jake had made was at 9:51 p.m. on March 15th, just minutes before he would have arrived at the non-existent address. But the call wasn't to Tony's Pizza, to Sarah, or to his parents. The 911 recording, when investigators finally retrieved it, was brief and chilling. 911, what's your emergency? This is Jake Williams. I'm a pizza delivery driver, and I think someone's following me. I'm on Quarry Road, and there's a car behind me with no headlights. I can't see the driver, but they've been following me for the last few miles. Are you in immediate danger, Jake? I don't know. I'm almost to the delivery address, but something feels wrong. The GPS says there's no house at this address, and now this car, the line went dead. The 911 operator had immediately dispatched a patrol car to Quarry Road. But by the time Officer Martinez arrived at 10:15 p.m., there was no sign of Jake, his car, or any other vehicle. The road was empty, as if no one had been there at all. This 911 call changed everything. Jake's disappearance was no longer treated as a simple missing person case. It was now a potential abduction, possibly worse. The fake pizza order, the non-existent address, the mysterious car with no headlights. Someone had lured Jake to that remote road with a specific purpose. But who? And why Jake? The discovery of Jake's 911 call sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detective Lisa Bennett, who had been assigned to the case, immediately recognized the signs of a premeditated crime. This wasn't a random disappearance or an accident. Someone had specifically targeted Jake Williams. The fake pizza order was bait, Detective Bennett would later explain to the media. Someone called Tony's Pizza, gave a false name and address, and waited for a delivery driver to show up. The question was whether they targeted Jake specifically, or if any driver would have sufficed. The investigation expanded rapidly. Phone records showed that the call to Tony's Pizza had come from a payphone at a gas station on Highway 15, about 10 miles from Millbrook. Security footage from the gas station was reviewed, but the camera angle didn't capture the phone booth clearly. All investigators could determine was that the caller was wearing dark clothing and appeared to be of medium build. Detective Bennett's team began interviewing everyone who had interacted with Jake in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. They spoke to his family, friends, co-workers, and customers. They examined his bank records, his social media activity, and his personal relationships. What they found was a young man with no enemies, no dangerous associations, and no reason anyone would want to harm him. Jake's girlfriend, Sarah, was devastated but cooperative. She provided investigators with detailed information about Jake's habits, his concerns, and his plans for the future. She confirmed that Jake had been excited about college and had been working extra shifts to save money. There was no indication of any problems in their relationship or in any other area of Jake's life. He was the most normal person you could imagine, Sarah told Detective Bennett. He worried about his grades, he saved every penny, and he talked about our future together. He wasn't involved in anything dangerous or illegal. He was just a good person trying to make something of himself. The investigation also focused on the mysterious car that had been following Jake. Detective Bennett's team canvassed the area, looking for anyone who might have seen an unusual vehicle on Quarry Road that night. They checked with all the local auto shops, looking for vehicles that might have had their headlights removed or disabled. They examined traffic cameras on the highways leading to and from Millbrook, but the rural nature of the area meant there were few cameras to review. Weeks passed, then months. The initial media attention began to fade, but Detective Bennett never stopped working the case. She followed up on every tip, investigated every lead, and kept in regular contact with Jake's family. The case file grew thicker, but the crucial breakthrough remained elusive. One of the most promising leads came from an unexpected source. 3 months after Jake's disappearance, a trucker named Harold Buckley contacted the police. He claimed that, on the night of March 15th, he had been driving on Highway 15 when he saw a car being pushed off the road near the entrance to the old quarry access road. It was around 10:30 p.m., Buckley told Detective Bennett. I was running late on my delivery, so I didn't stop. But I saw 2 men pushing a small car toward the trees. I thought maybe they were having engine trouble, but now that I think about it, the whole thing seems strange. Buckley's description of the car matched Jake's Honda Civic, light-colored, compact, with what appeared to be damage to the front bumper. He couldn't provide a clear description of the men, but he was certain that the car had been pushed, not driven, off the road. This lead prompted a more extensive search of the quarry area. Divers were brought in to search the water-filled pits, but the quarry was deeper than expected and filled with decades of debris. The search was dangerous and expensive. And after 2 weeks of diving, nothing related to Jake's disappearance was found. As the first anniversary of Jake's disappearance approached, Detective Bennett made a decision that would prove to be crucial years later. She decided to expand the investigation beyond Millbrook and look for similar cases in surrounding areas. What she discovered was disturbing. In the past 5 years, there had been 7 other cases of missing persons along rural roads in Pennsylvania and neighboring states. All involved young men between the ages of 18 and 25. All had been lured to remote locations under false pretenses, and in all cases, the men had simply vanished without a trace. The pattern was consistent and chilling. In each case, the missing person had received a call or message requesting their presence at a specific location. In each case, the location was isolated and rarely traveled. And in each case, the person had disappeared completely, leaving behind no evidence of their fate. Detective Bennett began working with investigators from other jurisdictions, sharing information and looking for connections between the cases. They found similarities in the methods used to lure victims, the types of locations chosen, and the complete absence of physical evidence. It appeared that they were dealing with someone or some group that was very skilled at making people disappear. But despite the emerging pattern, despite the expanded investigation, despite the dedicated efforts of multiple police departments, Jake Williams remained missing. His parents held vigils on every anniversary of his disappearance. Sarah eventually moved away from Millbrook, unable to bear the constant reminders of her lost love. Tony's Pizza closed its doors after Tony retired, taking with him the painful memories of that final delivery order. Years passed. The case remained open, but active investigation slowed as other cases demanded attention. Detective Bennett, now promoted to lieutenant, never forgot about Jake Williams, but she had to acknowledge that the trail had gone cold. What nobody knew was that the answers they sought were lying at the bottom of the old limestone quarry, waiting patiently for the day when the water would finally give up its secrets. 7 years. That's how long Jake Williams had been missing when the drought of 2010 began to reveal secrets that had been hidden beneath the waters of the abandoned limestone quarry. The summer of 2010 was the driest on record in Pennsylvania, with temperatures soaring above 100 degrees for weeks at a time. Rivers ran low, reservoirs dropped to dangerous levels, and the water-filled pits of the old quarry began to recede for the first time in decades. It was Tommy Martinez, a local teenager and son of the police officer who had responded to Jake's 911 call, who made the discovery that would change everything. Tommy was exploring the quarry with friends on August 14, 2010, when he spotted something unusual in the murky water near the eastern edge of the main pit. At first, I thought it was just a big rock or some old equipment, Tommy would later tell investigators. But as I got closer, I could see it was shaped like a small car sitting upright on the bottom of the quarry. Tommy immediately called his father, Officer Martinez, who rushed to the scene. What he saw confirmed his worst fears: the outline of a vehicle, clearly visible about 20 feet below the surface in what had once been much deeper water. Within hours, a full recovery operation was underway. Divers were brought in from the state police, along with specialized equipment for underwater vehicle recovery. The local fire department provided additional support, and Detective Bennett, now Lieutenant Bennett, personally supervised the operation. As the crane slowly lifted the vehicle from the quarry, everyone present felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The car was indeed a 1998 Honda Civic, light blue in color, with Pennsylvania license plates that matched Jake Williams' registration. After 7 years of searching, Jake's car had finally been found. But what was discovered inside the vehicle was far more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. The car was sitting upright on the quarry floor, as if it had been driven or pushed in carefully rather than simply dumped. The windows were all closed and the doors were locked. When investigators finally gained access to the interior, they found Jake's delivery bag still in the passenger seat, the 2 pizzas still inside, remarkably preserved by the cold water and lack of oxygen. But Jake himself was not in the car. What they found instead was evidence of a struggle. The driver's seat was pushed back much farther than it should have been for someone of Jake's height. The steering wheel was damaged, as if someone had gripped it with tremendous force. Most disturbing of all, there were scratch marks on the inside of the windows and doors, scratch marks that appeared to have been made by fingernails. The forensic examination of the vehicle revealed even more troubling details. DNA analysis showed that Jake's blood was present in the car, but not in large quantities. The blood spatter pattern suggested that Jake had been injured, but not fatally, while in the vehicle. More importantly, the blood evidence indicated that Jake had been alive when the car entered the water. This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation team. The car had been in the quarry for 7 years, but the evidence suggested that Jake had survived the initial submersion, at least for a time. The scratch marks on the windows suddenly took on a horrifying new meaning. But where was Jake's body? The search of the quarry intensified. Divers combed through every section of the water-filled pit, looking for any sign of human remains. They found old machinery, discarded tires, and decades of debris, but no trace of Jake Williams. It was as if he had simply vanished from inside his own car. Lieutenant Bennett ordered a complete forensic analysis of the vehicle and its contents. The results provided crucial new evidence about what had happened that night in 2003. The car's odometer showed that it had been driven approximately 23 miles beyond what would have been necessary to reach the fake address on Quarry Road. This meant that Jake had been taken somewhere else before his car ended up in the quarry. The gas tank was nearly empty, suggesting that the car had been driven extensively after Jake's disappearance. Most significantly, investigators found a second set of fingerprints in the car, fingerprints that didn't belong to Jake or anyone else in the police database. These fingerprints were on the steering wheel, the gear shift, and the door handles, indicating that someone else had driven Jake's car after he disappeared. The discovery of the car also provided new insights into the timeline of events. Based on the position of the vehicle on the quarry floor and the depth at which it was found, investigators determined that the car had been in the water for the full 7 years since Jake's disappearance. This meant that whatever had happened to Jake, it had occurred on the night he vanished or shortly thereafter. But the most disturbing evidence was yet to come. The forensic analysis of Jake's Honda Civic revealed details that would haunt the investigation team for years to come. Hidden in the trunk of the car, investigators found a plastic bag containing items that painted a terrifying picture of Jake's final hours. Inside the bag were Jake's wallet, his watch, and his cell phone charger. But there were also items that didn't belong to Jake: a roll of duct tape, a length of rope, and most disturbing of all, a Polaroid photograph. The photograph showed Jake, clearly taken after his disappearance. He appeared to be in some kind of basement or underground space, with concrete walls and a single bare light bulb visible in the background. Jake was restrained, his hands bound behind his back, but he was clearly alive and conscious when the photo was taken. On the back of the photograph, written in black marker, were the words, "Day 1. The delivery boy makes his first payment." Lieutenant Bennett stared at the photograph, her hands trembling. The implications were horrifying. Jake hadn't been killed immediately after his abduction. He had been taken somewhere and held captive. The photograph suggested that his captors had planned to hold him for an extended period, possibly to torture him or extract some kind of ransom. But why? Jake came from a working-class family. He had no access to significant money or valuable information. What kind of payment could his captors have expected? The forensic team continued their analysis of the evidence found in the car. The duct tape was examined for DNA evidence, and investigators found skin cells that matched Jake's profile. The rope showed signs of having been used to bind someone, with fibers that matched Jake's work uniform. Most disturbing was the discovery of a second Polaroid photograph, this one hidden in the glove compartment. This photo showed the same concrete basement, but now it was empty except for a wooden chair and what appeared to be bloodstains on the floor. On the back of this photograph were the words, "Day 7, final payment received." The timeline suggested by the photographs was chilling. Jake had been held captive for at least 7 days before. What? The photographs provided no clear answer about Jake's ultimate fate, but the blood on the floor in the second image suggested that his captivity had ended violently. Lieutenant Bennett assembled a task force to investigate the new evidence. The photographs were analyzed by experts in an attempt to identify the location where they were taken. The concrete walls, the type of light fixture, and the overall construction of the space suggested an older building, possibly industrial or commercial in nature. The investigation team began cataloging every basement, warehouse, and industrial building within a 50-mile radius of Millbrook. They looked for structures with concrete walls, exposed electrical systems, and the kind of isolation that would allow someone to hold a captive without detection. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired construction worker named Frank Delacroix saw the photographs on the evening news and immediately recognized the location. He called the police tip line and explained that he had worked on the construction of a small manufacturing facility in the 1970s, about 30 miles from Millbrook. "I remember that basement," Delacroix told investigators. "It was supposed to be a storage area for the factory, but they never finished it. The company went bankrupt before the building was completed. That light fixture, those concrete walls, I helped pour that concrete myself." The abandoned factory was located on Riverside Drive in the small town of Clearwater, about 45 minutes from Millbrook. The building had been vacant for over 20 years, changing hands multiple times, but never finding a permanent tenant. It was isolated, surrounded by woods, and easily accessible from several back roads. Lieutenant Bennett led a team to the factory on August 22, 2010. The building was in poor condition, with broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, and vegetation growing through cracks in the foundation. But the basement was exactly as depicted in the photographs. The concrete walls were the same. The electrical system was identical. And in the center of the room was a wooden chair, just as shown in the second photograph. But what investigators found in that basement would provide the final, horrifying piece of Jake Williams' story. The basement of the abandoned factory held evidence that would finally answer the question that had haunted Millbrook for 7 years. What happened to Jake Williams? Forensic specialists combed through every inch of the concrete room. They found bloodstains that matched Jake's DNA, confirming that he had been held in this location. They found rope fibers that matched the rope found in his car. And they found something else, something that would reveal the true horror of Jake's final days. Hidden behind a loose concrete block, investigators discovered a metal box containing additional photographs and a handwritten journal. The photographs documented Jake's entire captivity, day by day, showing his deteriorating condition and the increasingly violent treatment he endured. The journal, written in the same handwriting as the notes on the photographs, provided a detailed account of Jake's torture and eventual murder. But the most shocking discovery was the identity of Jake's killer. The journal was signed M. Brennan, Michael Brennan, a name that meant nothing to the investigators initially. But a background check revealed that Michael Brennan was a former employee of Tony's Pizza who had been fired 6 months before Jake's disappearance. Brennan had worked as a delivery driver for Tony's Pizza for 3 years, but he had been terminated after multiple customer complaints about his behavior. Several customers had reported that Brennan seemed unstable, making inappropriate comments and lingering at their homes longer than necessary. The final straw came when a female customer called to complain that Brennan had followed her inside her house uninvited and made threatening remarks. Tony Rossini had fired Brennan immediately, but the man had not taken the termination well. According to Tony's statement to police, Brennan had threatened to make everyone at Tony's pay for what he saw as unfair treatment. The journal entries revealed that Brennan had been watching Tony's Pizza for months, planning his revenge. He had specifically chosen to target Jake because Jake was Tony's favorite employee and because Jake's reliability meant that his disappearance would be noticed immediately. The entries described in disturbing detail how Brennan had made the fake pizza order, lured Jake to the quarry road, and forced him into a second vehicle at gunpoint. Jake had been taken to the abandoned factory, where Brennan had planned to hold him for ransom. But when Jake's family was unable to pay the $50,000 ransom demand, which was never actually delivered, Brennan had decided to kill Jake rather than release him. The journal's final entry, dated March 22, 2003, described Jake's murder in graphic detail. Brennan had strangled Jake with the rope found in the car, then disposed of the body in a way that ensured it would never be found. The entry concluded with Brennan's plan to sink Jake's car in the quarry to eliminate evidence of the crime. But where was Jake's body? The answer came from the final pages of the journal. Brennan had cremated Jake's remains in the factory's old industrial furnace, then scattered the ashes in the Susquehanna River. The furnace, when examined by investigators, still contained traces of human bone fragments that matched Jake's DNA. The investigation team now had a complete picture of Jake's final days, but they still needed to find Michael Brennan. The former pizza delivery driver had disappeared shortly after Jake's murder, and there had been no trace of him for 7 years. The search for Brennan led investigators across multiple states. They discovered that he had been using false identities and had been involved in at least 3 other abductions in different parts of the country. In each case, the victims had been young men who worked in service industries, pizza delivery, taxi drivers, and store clerks. But Brennan's crime spree had already come to an end. In 2008, he had been killed in a car accident in Nevada while fleeing from police after an attempted kidnapping. His real identity had never been established, and he had been buried in a pauper's grave under the name John Doe. The revelation that Jake's killer was already dead brought a mixture of relief and frustration to his family and friends. Justice could never be fully served, but at least they finally knew the truth about what had happened to the young man who had simply been trying to work his way through college. The discovery of Jake Williams' car and the subsequent revelation of his fate sent shockwaves through Millbrook and the surrounding communities. The case had captivated the region for 7 years, and the disturbing truth about Jake's final days was almost too horrible to comprehend. For Jake's family, the revelation brought both closure and renewed grief. David and Linda Williams had spent 7 years hoping that their son might still be alive, that he might walk through their door one day with an explanation for his disappearance. Learning that Jake had been murdered was devastating, but it also allowed them to finally begin the process of mourning. "We always held out hope," Linda Williams told reporters. "Even when logic told us that Jake was probably dead, we couldn't give up believing that he might come home. Now we know the truth, and while it's horrible, at least we can finally put him to rest." The family held a memorial service for Jake on September 15, 2010, exactly 7 months after his car was discovered. The service was attended by hundreds of community members, including many people who had participated in the original search efforts. Tony Rossini, who had never forgiven himself for taking the fake pizza order, spoke at the service about Jake's character and his dreams for the future. "Jake was the kind of young man who gave you hope for the future," Tony said through tears. "He worked hard, he treated people with respect, and he never lost sight of his goals. He didn't deserve what happened to him, and we'll never forget him." The case also had broader implications for law enforcement in the pizza delivery industry. Lieutenant Bennett used the Jake Williams case as a model for training other investigators on how to handle missing persons cases involving possible abduction. The discovery of the car 7 years later emphasized the importance of never giving up on cold cases and continuing to search for evidence even when leads have gone cold. Pizza delivery companies across the country began implementing new safety protocols for their drivers. Many companies started requiring drivers to call in after each delivery, established buddy systems for late-night deliveries, and provided GPS tracking for delivery vehicles. While these measures couldn't prevent all crimes, they made it more difficult for predators to target delivery drivers. The case also highlighted the importance of background checks for employees in service industries. Michael Brennan's history of inappropriate behavior had been documented by Tony's Pizza, but this information had never been shared with law enforcement or other potential employers. New legislation was proposed to create databases of employees who had been fired for threatening or violent behavior, allowing employers to make more informed hiring decisions. But perhaps the most significant impact of the Jake Williams case was its effect on the community of Millbrook itself. The small town had been forever changed by the loss of one of its most promising young residents. The sense of safety and security that had characterized the community was shattered by the revelation that a predator had been living among them, planning and executing a horrific crime. The town established a scholarship fund in Jake's name, providing financial assistance to local students pursuing higher education. The scholarship was funded by donations from community members and businesses, and it ensured that Jake's dream of education would live on in other young people. Sarah, Jake's girlfriend, eventually returned to Millbrook for the memorial service. She had built a new life in another state, but she felt it was important to honor Jake's memory and support his family. She spoke at the service about the Jake she had known, the loving, ambitious young man who had been excited about his future. "Jake was planning to propose to me when he finished college," Sarah revealed for the first time. "He had already bought a ring and was saving up for a small ceremony. He talked about the house we would buy, the children we would have, and the life we would build together. That future was stolen from us. But I want everyone to know that Jake died loving life and looking forward to tomorrow. The investigation into Jake's murder officially closed in October 2010, but Lieutenant Bennett continued to work on the other cases that appeared to be connected to Michael Brennan. Over the following years, she was able to link Brennan to the disappearances of 6 other young men, providing closure to their families as well. The Jake Williams case became a subject of study in criminology courses and police training programs. It demonstrated the importance of thorough investigation, the value of preserving evidence, and the need to never give up hope in missing persons cases. The case also showed how environmental factors, in this case the drought that lowered the quarry's water level, could provide crucial breakthroughs years after a crime was committed. The story of Jake Williams is a reminder of how quickly a normal life can be shattered by the actions of someone driven by hatred and revenge. On March 15, 2003, Jake was a young man with everything to live for: a loving family, a devoted girlfriend, and dreams of a bright future. If this case gave you chills like it did me, smash that like button right now. And if you're craving more bone-chilling mysteries that will keep you up at night, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. But here's what I'm dying to know. What do you think really happened during those missing 7 years? Drop your theories in the comments below, because some of you always catch details that blow my mind. And shout out your location. Are you watching from Texas? Australia? Maybe you're binge watching from your bedroom at 3 a.m.? I want to know where my mystery addicts are tuning in from. Before you scroll away, what unsolved case is keeping you up at night? Drop it in the comments and it might be our next deep dive. Your suggestion could be the next story that changes everything. Remember, every share, every comment, every like helps us bring these forgotten stories back to light. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your mind questioning, because the truth is always stranger than fiction, and it's always closer than you think.